You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks and Zach Bechtold. We hope you enjoy this week's show, and you can find out more about us by going online at beardedtheologians.com, where you can pick up a few t-shirts, listen to a few old episodes, and find ways that you can connect with us. Thank you for listening. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold. And today we have a special guest on, friend of the podcast, friend in real life, and just all around pretty great human being. We have Rev Kellen Roggenbuck with us again today. Kellen, man, thanks for being on.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Would you share with our listeners, last time we had you on was for a children's book, and now we have you on for a not children's book. And but if you'll remind our folks a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do.
Yeah, I was telling my wife that I was coming on, and for an adult book this time, she said, "Don't call it an adult book. That gives people the wrong idea." Right, so a non-children's book is the way to put it. But yeah,
I almost said adult book also, but that's the other podcast.
That's like I'd probably sell way more books, right?
Right.
But yeah, so. I am, as of this, I'm just over 100 days in a new role in my day job, which is the executive director of NextGen Ministries for the Wisconsin Conference of the United Methodist Church, and so my title goes all the way around to the back side of the business card, right? But I've been a pastor for 8 years, and I was in youth ministry for 12 before that. So I'm celebrating my 20th year in ministry, July 1st, so just passed, which is really exciting. I live in Wisconsin in the Janesville area, which is just south of Madison, if you're not from the Midwest. I live here with my family, and just loving ministry. I love the United Methodist Church, and had this opportunity to write a book, and it kind of fell in my lap. I love to write. It's one of my favorite things. I love to write and to preach, and this was kind of a new adventure and sort of a dream of mine to always put pen to paper and have people say, this is worth reading. So that was very exciting. But it's been an adventure, and I'm looking forward to telling you about it.
Yeah. No, you and I have been talking about you writing a book for years. And I'm really excited that you finally have something in print, and just looking through it, it looks great. I'm pumped. So your first book, your first not children's book, it's called Called Out, Discerning God's Plan for Your Church. So, man, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I don't want to read the introduction, but this is the introduction, which was that and Zach, you know this because I tapped you to come in one year, but I teach at the Iowa Licensing School, which if you're not a United Methodist licensed pastor or a United Methodist person, we have a process of taking people who have not gone to seminary, but equipping them to go and be pastors while they learn. And that's a licensing endeavor. And so I teach evangelism and discipleship there. And I was very lucky to have Zach riding shotgun one year in that process. But as we were going through the process of what it looks like in a church-wide space to look at discipleship pathways and discipleship structures, discernment was a really big piece that was underdeveloped in the book that we were using and underdeveloped in my teachings. And so I started seeking out spaces to learn more about institutional discernment, congregational discernment, organizational discernment. There was a training. It was a day and a half. I was so excited, and I got there, and I was pumped. I had my laptop fully charged, ready to crank out some mind-blowing notes. And the whole time, from start to finish, one of two things happened. The first half of it, almost the whole first day, was sort of talking about the state of the church and why we need new things. And first, that was heartbreaking for me because like everyone in that room was a pastor, and most of them were pastors I knew. Like we were all there because we already knew that, right? Like we all know. It was like kind of, they were describing why we all came, but we already know why we came, right? And so finally, when we get to the second half, I was like, sweet, here we go. And what that was simply the presenter talking in great depth and detail about the exciting things that they've done in their very specific context. It didn't teach how they had gotten from seeing a need or an opportunity in their world, praying about it, following God, and then finally doing the nuts and bolts of executing this new ministry thing. And I looked around, and feverishly people are taking notes, right? They're like, oh man, I want to do church in a bar, or I want to do this this barbershop expression, or whatever it was. And I'm thinking, this is not how we do this. Like, I'm not certain how we do this, but this is definitely not it. And it sent me down this like rabbit hole where I just read everything I could on personal discernment and organizational theory, and some of these different things that all plug into how we go from knowing that we need to do something and finding out what God has in plan. So I started looking back at my ministry, especially, and saying, what are the times that I have been so confident that looking back, I know the Holy Spirit was in what we were doing? Like, how did we get to that place? And then using the resources and everything, it just started mapping this out. And just the way that my brain works, it starts with an outline and it starts growing and growing. And then all of a sudden I had chapters. And then here we are, right? A book that I think is wildly important in the space, because I don't disagree with the first half of that assessment, that we are in this like very scary but exciting space in the church where we really can go and do new things or different things or new to us things. We just need to do it with like God at the table.
I love that. And having done that licensing school with you, one, it was a blast, and I didn't really add anything or say much. I just got to hang out with really cool people and hear you unpack a lot of this in that way, and give people who kind of have baby deer legs, right, heading into the church, and giving them permission to not only just see what's going on and where they can be present, but permission to fail, right? Permission to go do something and feel that call to a space, to a community, to whatever it is. And I think when I think about like my call to ministry and the discernment process, and even just today leading the church, discerning who and where we are called to be, man, that failure it's right up there of holding me back, right? And you do a great job of saying, go do it. See what happens. See where God shows up. And if it doesn't work, there's going to be another place. But I think you're spot on. We don't do the discernment process well, whether that's for folks looking at taking the journey of being a pastor in any form of that, or our churches stepping out into new and different scary things. And so digging into that, I think, is huge, because you're right. We all come to the table knowing what the reality is, but we spend a lot more time unpacking that than we actually do what is it we're called to? Where is God moving in and around us to bring us into the next thing? And I think that's a great question. I appreciate you not only asking that, but trying to give us a tool to move with, right?
Well, and I think that's where one of the things I've noticed, and I didn't grow up in the Methodist church, didn't grow up in church period, but didn't grow up in the Methodist church either, is that there's an assumption that there's an assumption that the process, there's an assumption that all the things that are united, like the things, and we don't do a good job of like unpacking what does it mean to be a clergy person or a laity, and I think for me the chapter that spoke to me was the one on let the laity loose. Like, I really loved how you there's a couple lines in there that were just really good about recognizing when the laity just really let them do and be in spaces that maybe clergy can't or shouldn't be in. And I think there's some importance there of discernment on our part, knowing that we don't have to be at all the things. There is something freeing about saying, hey, lady, go and do this thing, and I'll be your cheerleader. I'll support you, but I know that I don't need to be there. And it's not taking yourself out of the equation of like your job, but it's more of, hey, like, I believe in you. I want to encourage you. And so go do this, because I know that the moment I show up in the room, the eyes become focused on me, and we can be more can get done if I'm not in the room, whatever that may be. And I actually found myself talking about this on Monday night with our Bible study group about how, and I was literally just happening walking by the group and everybody changed because, oh, wait, the senior pastor's in the room. And so, like, that discernment of understanding the space that we occupy, whatever our position may be, I think is important. But like I said, I really did love your chapter on laity, letting him loose. Like, I think we need to do that more.
Yeah, the juxtaposition of the two things that we're talking about with both of your feedback here is that, like, first, as pastors, there's this like, we did discern a call, right? We had a call, and we whether we fought it and we ran from it, like, that's a lot of people's stories, or we embraced it and we explored it and did all these things. Like, we have some experience with discernment, and then we absolutely don't use those skills at all in our ministry. And I won't speak in absolutes. Some people are very good at this, but I think we really struggle with this. And then also, we do this thing where we are like, but we are the ones that have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the lay people just have to follow. And I say this in the book, and I will never argue this point. The things in ministry, when I did that audit and looked back on my time in ministry and the things that I've done that I absolutely see God in, and I see worlds changing and kingdom building, they're almost uniformly something that was brought to me by a layperson who said, I think this is what God wants us to do. And whether it was dumb luck or divine inspiration, that I said, how can the church help? Instead of saying, I'm going to take this up, or dismissing it and being like, you don't know what you're talking about. I mean, there were things I had no idea how to do, and out of my wheelhouse completely. But there's, almost every chapter has an example of something that I didn't know that we were going to do, or wasn't going to bear fruit the way that it did. And it really was this organizational space of all of us coming together, and especially the laity sharing what God is telling them. Because I think as pastors, we do this thing where as soon as we become pastors, like, our own faith, our own discernment, our own Bible stuff, all that goes up on a shelf because it becomes part of our work.
Mm-hmm.
Right now that I'm not behind a pulpit and I'm working at the conference level, I was sitting in a service for the first time in a church that I didn't work at for, I think, 20 years. Mm-hmm. And it was like mind blowing to be in a space, like, to pull a Bible down and read a Bible passage that I wasn't preparing a sermon for, or writing a liturgy around, or something like that. We sometimes miss the forest for the trees because we're like facilitating everybody else's faith. And when the laity are involved, they give us the space to step back and see, oh my gosh, you got it. Let's go. So the big piece of advice there that I keep telling myself is, when somebody comes to me with something and they say, I think God wants our church to do this, I mentally real quick say, is this in line with our mission and vision? Is this something that a church should be doing? And then I say, how can the church help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I had a layperson come to me about a month ago, and they were like, "Hey, is it possible to start a caregiver support group?" And I was like, "Yeah, why don't we already have one? What are we doing?" And they were like, "That's what I'm asking. Like, where are we?" And they were honest. They were like, I'm coming from a very selfish place here. I need it. I'm a caregiver myself, but I've looked around our congregation and across our community, and we just need a safe place for people who are in my position to come and say, this is really hard, and I'm struggling with it, and to say the things out loud that they can't say at home, right? Because it's hard. And I was like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. We got this. It's in line with who we are and making space for people. And it's been such uh, such a just beautiful process of gathering people in the room over the last over the last month, really, and watching folks who are caring for their loved ones or who have cared for loved ones go, "That's really hard, and I'm really sad, and there's some resentment here, and there's some anger, and there's some frustration, and I know that I can sit here and be open and honest and let that go, and then go home and keep caring for my loved one, and just take a break." And uh, embarrassingly enough, I'd have never thought of having a group like that. I stand in the pulpit every Sunday and I see my folks and I see who's caring for their loved one. And it never struck me, hey, maybe we should gather those people together and just make some space for them. And it's been such a beautiful thing because it came from a layperson, didn't come from me. And now I get to sit in the room. Uh, and it reminded me just of the sense of discernment for me. Let's take a beat. Let's hear what our people are saying. Instead of being like, nah, I'm too busy for that. I can't do that. That's not, yeah, you go do it, right? Or whatever the case may be. Or hey, the library down the street's got one of those groups. You know, those are all well and good, but seize the opportunity and hear where God's speaking through other people. Going, hey, what about this? What about this? So I appreciate you pushing on that. Would you unpack? We're using a lot of church words called discernment, things like that. And would you unpack? I like the way you unpack in the book discernment, but would you touch on that for a minute and kind of what discernment means for you and how maybe that's changed for you as you wrote this book?
Yeah, that was something that right off the bat I knew I had to explore is this sort of two camps of these messages, right? Discernment, the way that I express it in the book and the way I see it is our ability to listen and hear what God is saying, and then also then part of the discernment is being able to have the context in which that message makes sense, right? And the call is the thing that God has in store, right? The discernment is me saying, "Hey Zach, why don't you come over to my house? We're gonna have a party," right? And the party's the call, or maybe the party is like, "Bring ice," because I
Right.
don't have enough ice cubes, right? Um, and so and there's a whole lot of facets that the book explores about really looking at the filters of understanding the call through discernment. When I present on this, I like to talk about the book Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where in the story, this alien race builds this massive supercomputer to come up with the answer to life and everything, and it computes and spits out the number 42.
Right.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
And nobody knows what that means. So I have to build a bigger and better computer to try to figure out what the question is, that the answer is 42. And I think that's such a great image of discernment, right? God pointing us at something, and we need to be able to understand that question before we can execute the call. So to answer your question, discernment is that process. Starting with prayer, asking God, inviting God to speak into your life, and all of the different steps along the way of what it looks like to listen and pick apart and analyze. And then the call is what you go and do, right? And that's part of our purpose, part of our creation, at least my theology of creation, right? And call that like we were created to do something, probably lots of some things. But our churches are the same way, right? Our church has a unique call to go and do something at this moment, in this time, in their context. We just need to discern, listen and figure out what God is already doing that's inviting us to partner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really think that one of the problems we have as clergy is identifying the call of laity, and that like helping people understand that while I'm called to this particular office, laity are called in this particular time and space, and that as a call, laity is a calling within itself, and that we don't do a good job of talking about that in the church. I've sat on many a decoms where I'm like, oh, you're an amazing layperson, but you are definitely not called for ordained ministry or local pastor licensing. And that I think that that's where, as pastors, our job is discernment to help people to discern. It's not about saying, oh, I've had so many people come under ministry through me. It's we equip people to do ministry that they are called to. And that there is, I really believe there is a call for people to be in lay ministry. I don't think it has to be, I think the way that we honor that is those people who have that call to be a clergy person, we nurture that. Those people that are very clear about their call to being in the lay space, then we need to nurture that too. And I don't think we do a good job of that part as clergy, because we want to get them in, like, right? Like there's people that want to have that. And and I think that as we talk about this idea of discernment, it really takes time. I don't think there's a time process on discernment. Like, I don't think it's like, oh, you've given it 10 minutes, you're good. Like, I mean, if that were the case, then I probably wouldn't be in ministry today, because the first time I said no. I mean, but I think that that's where, when we let the Spirit in and be led by God to do the work that we're created to do, and we let the Spirit lead us and guide us, then we can find amazing things to be done. Like, I love Undy Sunday. Like, I'm now gonna like figure out a way that I can fit that in my church lot, however we do church or however we do things here. Like, I want to figure that out, how we can help provide underwear for those in need, because I know that there's a need for that in different spaces. So as you think about what's the biggest thing that you've learned since writing this book?
Well, I think the biggest thing still is the vacuum that exists around church discernment. And recently I met with the cabinets of the Northern Illinois and Wisconsin conference, and this was something that we spent almost an hour as a combined space, both of those because they share an Episcopal area, talking about is what if discernment was the deciding factor? Like, what if it wasn't scarcity mentality? What if it wasn't loyalty to maintaining a failing building? What if it wasn't fear of losing new or existing members to pursue new members? What if it wasn't budgets that we can't afford anymore? What if what we were doing was simply following God's lead? And what if we had a process to do that? And so I know that there's still a very real need in the world for this. And that's why, even though this was not the first thought I ever had for a book, my first idea, I think it's that's the reason it's been so well received, is because this need is substantial. But in the process of writing it, I would say that it was both sort of edifying and humbling to look back at lots of my failures in ministry, in times where I was trying to force a circle peg that was a really cool, really flashy, really brilliant circle peg that just didn't fit in our square context, and seeing that I was completely missing the boat on asking God. I mean, because that's the other piece is sometimes I like to think of myself as a creative individual and an out of the box thinker and a great nonlinear problem solver. And so one of the things I get jammed up with in this process is not looking for God's route to a solution in a situation, but instead trying to create my way out of something. And those things can be great. Sometimes I get lucky. But just as many times I look back and be like, man, that was such a cool idea. I can't believe it failed so spectacularly. But it was just because it was not what God had in store for us. And so being able to look at that and say, where did I miss the boat? How can we be focusing? And that's the other piece of this thing is with this book. I actually wanted it in the book, but Abington has it as its own thing. It's a free resource that you can, after you've purchased the book, you can download. That is a process that has forms and questions and suggested meetings and opening prayers and closing prayers and writing all of this process of taking a church from the identifying of a situation, that need for discernment, all the way through the evaluation at the end of being like, do we look back and say, yes, this was what God had in store? Did we miss the boat? Should we start over? And I think that process is something that doesn't exist anywhere, and I think is so important.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about that a little bit in your Stop Striving for Butts and Pews chapter, which I love. Right, big fan of that. Little bummed to use Trevor as an example here, but he's got to have his day too, right? Yeah, no, I the Bar Plus Church, right? Like just the whole idea in Trevor's movement through that of creating space for people right where they are, and pushing back on that idea that this is going to be a stepping stone for butts and pews, right? And you kind of talked about, well, we do that so much, and well, how is this going to go into the building? How is this going to make sure more people are there on Sunday? Or how is this event or this thing going to come back to this church? And it doesn't have to, right? And
Yeah.
kind of what you were saying is, man, sometimes we just do things and we miss the boat. And we ask the wrong questions, or we have the wrong outcomes or goals in mind for it. And instead, maybe there's just this really cool thing that's happening that it's okay to happen right there, and we can figure it out later. And I think Trevor's expression of Bar Plus Church really did that well. Of let's just make some space and make space for people to explore their faith and their curiosity and wonder through all of that, and ask really hard questions, and not end with the invitation of, well, we'll answer those on Sunday morning, or we'll answer those in Bible study, or we'll answer those when you can go to the stuffy place that we answered those questions. No, let's have a beer and talk about it, and talk about it in a real way. And if you never come back to this space, that's okay. But if you find a home here, great, let's do that. I think there's something so freeing about that when we start trying to discern our call, or just who we are and what we're doing. Of it doesn't ever have to point back to anything. It can just be what it is. And I have to remind myself that a lot. I have to remind leadership of that a lot. It's okay. It can just be this thing.
We get lost in those metrics. I mean, I was, like I said, I was just meeting with the cabinets, and you just hear it. And it's like, we increased this by 30%. In my head, I was like, you just went from 3 people to 9 people. I'm pretty sure. Right?
Yeah.
Or is that 300%? I don't know. You went 9 people to 12 people. You got 3 to 4 people. Like we throw around these things, these false metrics that affirm what we're doing to continue what we're doing, or to sidestep the deep need for change. And when we stop using number-based metrics, when we stop looking at attendance numbers, growth, and I'm just as guilty of it. Like I love talking about, I was at my first church. We started with 45, and the Sunday before we shut down for COVID, we had 90 in the pews, right? That feels good. As a pastor, but also it feels good as a pastor because I'm patting myself on the back for leading this church in change, which is like my own, course in probably. But instead, Trevor's is such a great example because at the end of the day, like it was something that he discerned as a pastor to go out and do, but it didn't point back to the church because he's quick to say his church was not ready for these folks.
Right.
But what it was an on-ramp into a relationship with God in the kingdom, right? It's not about butts and pews, but hearts in kingdom, right? Yeah. So if we can stop looking at how does this, it's funny, for all the marketing for this book, I had to come up with like evocative little snippets to put on pictures of beaches and put out on social media. But one of them is that we're called to make disciples, not donors. Right. And that is like an aggressive statement, but like that's when it comes down to when we're worrying more about how we keep our doors open or how much money is in the plate than we are about reaching new people, we're missing what our purpose is, even if that means we're doing something that doesn't. And when we go on mission trips and we help people in third world countries and all of these things, we get it. That's it. None of those people are sending money back to our church. None of them are coming on Sunday. That is what we're living out. But somehow when we do it domestically, we get real wrapped up in that. And so, I think when we look at what we're doing as an expression of building relationship, I always say that as pastor, my job is to help people fall in love with Jesus Christ. Like, if that's what I'm doing, it has, like, maybe that's my metric, right? If I'm able to look at, and it's binary, I guess. If I can look at someone and be like, man, that guy loves Jesus Christ, then it's a success. Otherwise, there's still work to do.
Right.
Well, and I think that's where, like, the idea of narrative, the narrative metric, I think, is the most important metric that we have that we have forgotten about. I will contend to that on my dying day. One, we're a narrative people. I mean, we have a narrative book that we like lean into. These stories about how people lived out their faith over a course of a millennia, and yet we're entering into charge conference season, and I don't see very many narrative questions on the report of how we're changing lives, how we're making a difference in our community. Like, that stuff matters to me more than anything. I would much rather like do something that helps people. And I love how you grow people closer to Jesus. Like, I would much rather have those conversations than saying, well, we grew Sunday school by 10% and 10% was 5 people. Like, and they just only stayed because they like the donuts. Like, like, I would love to have, I really think that we need to be more narrative in sharing our story. I think churches don't do a good enough job of that, period. And that's where we, as pastors, I think we need to lean into that a little more, of sharing why our community matters and what we're doing. And like, we just did a ministry fair last week, and it was really cool. One of the comments that I had that came back to me, I was like, I didn't realize we did so much. Because sometimes when we forget that we have ministries that are very seasonal, maybe they're for a couple of weeks because they feel a need, or they facilitate something for just a couple of weeks. And then we forget about that until it comes that time again. Like, we know in our church, we know that prison backpack is always the after Lent, and that we know that that will be coming. But then we forget about it because, well, we wait until it's time to talk about it again. But to see that again and watching people who are new to our church to say, wow, like, that's a great thing. Like, it's a good reminder of how we have to do better at sharing what we do and why we do it. And that the metrics of, I just have a hard time with metrics. Always will, always have. I feel like that we're a narrative people. We should be sharing the story of how God's making a difference in us and through us. If we can do that, then everything else takes care of itself. How does you, as you're in a new role as a conference staff person. And so how do you articulate that metric? Like, how do you articulate the narrative within what you do as someone who's at the top? Like, you're in the top. I mean, so how do you articulate that?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm blessed to be working with a bishop that understands the qualitative over the quantitative, because we have paper that says the things that we are doing are wildly successful. And now that I'm in this space, and I can look at the actual reality of what's happening, boots on the ground, and it's like, we have a lot of work to do. And we can massage those numbers, or we can report those numbers, or we can ask just the right questions to make it look like we're doing fine and we're thriving. But that's not being good stewards of the ministries we've been entrusted with. And so the bishop gets that, and so the Bishop Shreen in Wisconsin, and he is really working in our culture now to tell stories. We're about to embark on a year of what he's saying in Wisconsin and in Northern Illinois, a year of practicing hope. And you cannot quantify. You can absolutely try, but you cannot quantify hope, right? Yeah. This is something that is story and narrative based. So I'm very lucky to be in a space that understands that sometimes we need to look past the metrics in place and tell the stories, to be willing to share gently the truths and realities that we're in, not to sugarcoat, but also to understand what is the purpose here. I wrote an article for it might have been Insight that was about redefining our metrics, talking just about this. And I talk a lot about Brene Brown because I'm a little bit of a Brene Brown fanboy. I love the work that she does, but she's a qualitative scientist and catches a lot of shade from literally every other scientist who's like, nope, numbers, this is how we do it, right? But there was pushback on that article. There's a whole bunch of comments that are like, no, we are supposed to go and make disciples of all nations, and we're supposed to, the whole world and every person saved. And that's just missing the understanding. Like, yes, we are supposed to do that. That is part of the end of every worship service I have ever put on. I quote, in go now and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And all nations is a lot of people. And so we have to think about that. But it's about people, right? Individuals and their hearts. And it's not about getting all of them in one building or another, or sitting in one type of seat on a certain time on Sunday, but about that same thing, falling in love with Jesus Christ, understanding that the kingdom of God is theirs and that we are building it, but it is also ours, and on all of these eschatological realities, right? And so if we can get lost in the numbers, we're not doing that. The qualitative data, the ability to tell stories, and this is just what you're talking about. I'm just agreeing with you long-windedly. That's something we talk in my house. My wife was saying, "Are you agreeing with me? Because you're talking a lot for just saying I agree," and so I do that. But you're absolutely right. And in my role, that is a bit of a struggle, because not everyone is as enlightened as the bishop. They want to see the numbers. They want to see the factors. They want to see what's this year's attendance versus last year. What's the budget dollars? What was the return on this? And it's not always that simple.
Mm-hmm. And that's something I really, really appreciate. You do that well through this book of talking about, here's kind of some of the number metric-y things and whatnot, but overall, you do a beautiful job of telling about the who, right? This is definitely a topic you can get in the weeds on and be like, here's how you discern call. Here's how your church moves forward at step A, B, C. And you've done a beautiful job of doing a little bit of that, but also going, hey, here's who's doing it. And here's how it's impacted their community. And here's how they've built relationships. And you talk about the who so well. Because you're right, it doesn't matter that 45 people were in church last week, but Sally was there and Hank was there, and they had a moment during the service where they felt movement by the Holy Spirit and called into this space, right? Like they got something from it, and that matters. That matters so much more than we had X number of people sitting in a pew or X number of people coming to a Bible study. They had this really good conversation and are sharing their hearts in a way that otherwise they haven't been or don't have a space for or haven't thought about. And to me, that's the thing I think we get stuck in the church way too often. We forget about the who. We got to be able to say who's with us, who's there, and that, yeah, man, they love Jesus and are feeling that moment. And it's leading them in their personal life to share that love and grace with other people, which is pretty dang cool in how we kingdom build, right? And how God's grace continues to change the world around us. It may start with us. I doubt it does in folks like us, but it certainly doesn't end there, right? Like it's got to leave our buildings. It's got to leave our homes. Otherwise, who cares? So I didn't really have a question. I had a long-winded way of saying, "Hey, man, I like your book."
Yeah, I've kind of been in the same boat. Like, I don't really have good questions for her. Just like, I want to affirm everything he's saying, because he definitely has the idea of discernment. Like, I don't feel like we talk about discernment enough, and what that means for people, for everybody, not just clergy. Like, we do a good job with that with people who are entering the process. I mean, there's a book for that. Many of us, at least, received a copy. I know Zach didn't read it because Zach doesn't read books that don't have pictures. But definitely, I think this is a great book for people who are in that space, or as us as clergy people looking at things maybe in a different perspective that we hadn't thought about before. I think you definitely do a good job of that. Where can you find the book?
Yeah, so you can pick it up at Amazon. That's where I get a lot of my books, which I'm sure that they're independent bookstores that are cringing that I would say that, but you can get that shipped to you if you're busy like me. But you can also go over to Cokesbury and get it there. I think you can even go to Abington and get it off of their website. If you're going to be down in Kansas City in just a little bit for the Leadership Institute, it should be available at the bookstore there. And if not, maybe I'll fill up a backpack and I'll be selling them out of my duffel or out of my trench coat in the parking lot. Yeah, right. Remember the time I got asked to leave the Leadership Institute for selling weird stuff in the parking lot? Yeah.
Yeah, you end the book with "Make It Weird," so you're doing great. That's what I want to affirm. Just having hands on this book for those of you who are listening. Man, pick it up. Read it with you. Read it with your staff. Read it with your leadership. Read it with your spouse or partner, a friend. I don't know. It's a dang good book, man. Good job. Good work.
I appreciate it, and like. It's so hard being in a space where like I am obviously here because I am an author and I wrote a book and I want you to read it because that's what all authors want, right? But I also really believe in the tools created here, and I worked really hard to take the book that I was writing and I loved writing, but trying to give you the tool that comes along with the book. You can download it, you can print it out and use it to take your church on this journey, because every church, whether you are, you're looking at those sort of inaccurate metrics or unhelpful metrics, and you're in sharp decline in giving and in attendance, and wondering how you can keep your doors open, you need to go through this congregational discernment process. Or if you're like, we're about to open a new campus because like we are busting at the seams and things are going really well and we're thriving. Cool. Discern how God wants you to use that new campus in this new context, because it's going to be different, right? I would never be as bold as suggesting that Church of the Resurrection should all buy my book and read it, all 3,000 clergy or whatever they have, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the principles are there that we should always be asking this question, and I'm hoping that this creates a relevant tool and put together in a way that's easy to read and enjoyable. But leads you along this journey so that at the end of the day, we're just doing what God wants us to do, whatever that might be.
I'd be so bold. Church of the Resurrection, buy this book. Use it with your staff. I think it'd help you out. No, man, thank you. And I think that's what I appreciate about this. We've known you for a while, get to work with you on some cool stuff. Have some Google document outlines with you, and just... I don't always know our authors that come on. And so, I just get to hear about it for the first time. But I know you believe in this. I know this is just who you are. And it comes out through the pages. And I'm pumped for you, man. It's good stuff. Thank you.
Awesome. If you're in Kansas City, find me. I'll look like this, right? So just come and give me a high five or something. Or if you're looking for a book, I'll help you track one down.
Yeah. For those that are listening on a podcast and not watching it on YouTube, he basically looks like Zach and I. So bald just guy, more tattoos. Beard, way more tattoos than both of us combined. It's because I don't have any and Zach has a few. And so it'd be easy for him to find there in Kansas City, at least at Resurrection anyways.
He is much more handsome than us. So you get
that's true too. For you. Yeah. Kellen, definitely thank you for joining us today, and we'll share a link to where they can buy the book in our show notes. And so listeners, thank you for listening. Feel free to check out all of his books. He's got a couple kids books as well that I know that he'd love for you to pick up as well. And so thank you for being on today. And so for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
Subscribe and like this video. And push that thumbs up.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out.